Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are going to be looking at Team Black in the House of the Dragon and Dance of the Dragon more broadly. Usual spoiler warnings at the top of this video. Show spoilers are not okay. I don't have any show spoilers anyway. Book spoilers are fine. They have been roughly sticking to the book so far, but they have made some significant changes along the way. So just because something happens in the book doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen on the show. But yeah, we will be talking about a few things that happen later on in the dance. As always, I am going to be framing this around questions from my patrons. So I'll be working my way through them. I'll try and pick up as many things from the chat as I can as we go through. Just a few little tidbits of information from around the wider geeky world just before we get into it. Rings of Power, if you are a fan, they have announced today 7 new actors for season 2. Now, this is causing a reasonable amount of speculation because Celeborn, Círdan, both confirmed for coming. Certainly Círdan is going to be in season 2. Celeborn will appear at some point. Presumably some more of these are going to be characters from Rhûn, off to the east, which is where the Stranger and Nori are going. But also, probably most significantly, the character of Adar has been recast. Joseph Maul, who many of us know from Game of Thrones, he was Benjen Stark, has left, and he is being replaced in that role. I'm afraid, actually, momentarily the name of the actor replacing him has escaped my mind. But I thought Joseph Maul did a fantastic job in season 1. There's no hint of him losing his job for not being good at it or anything like that. As far as I understand, I think it's artistic differences or something along those lines, but it will make a big change because, as I say, I think for me, of the new characters, Adar was by quite a long way my favorite. I thought that was the one that fitted best in with Tolkien's ethos, so I loved that, and best wishes to Joseph Maul for whatever he's going on to after this. The Witcher, we have got semi-confirmed rumor, by which I mean that Redanian intelligence, for those who do not know, Redanian intelligence is the top website looking at sort of behind the scenes of what's going on with The Witcher. They have confirmed from reliable sources that there is going to be another spin-off, and there is a new spin-off in the works, in pre-production, but reasonably well developed, about the rats. Now, those who've read the Witcher books will know who the rats are. They are, without giving too many spoilers away, they are a sort of young bandit group who Ciri falls into in around books 2-3 of the main Witcher series. They will appear at the end of, as I understand, at the end of season 3, which is going to be coming up in the summer of next year, and then be appearing for most, presumably, of season 4. The idea is that this spin-off about the rats is going to happen between seasons 3 and 4. So what does this mean? Well, I think it's quite an intriguing choice, to be honest. The rats are not, if you've read the books, you'll know that they're not all the most sympathetic of characters, let's put it that way, but they are very important to Ciri's development as a character. So I do wonder whether what they're planning on doing is a kind of an origin story for them after we've been introduced to them in season 3, but before we have their main storyline in season 4. So that might allow the characters to become slightly more sympathetic. That's just my best guess. I do not have any inside information on that, but it's on good authority that that is in the works. The other thing to keep an eye on is not this weekend. This is with Game of Thrones hat on. Not this weekend, but next weekend is the first official Game of Thrones convention. I say official because there have been a couple of excellent and very well run fan-led conventions that have been going on for a few years, Con of Thrones and Ice and Fire Con, but this is the first official one, by which I mean HBO are running it. Why is that important? Well, firstly, you may wish to go. I believe it's in LA. But secondly, we've been looking for when is it that HBO are going to be announcing their spin-offs, their extra spin-offs. House of the Dragon was such a huge success. Surely they're going to be announcing a few extra spin-offs. This is probably the next best opportunity they have. If they were going to announce it at their own convention, it's probably a good place to do it. It probably guarantees that if they do it another year, then people will be buying tickets in the hope that maybe they'll get another exclusive going on there. So keep an eye on that. As I say, not this weekend, but next weekend. My sort of little radar went off when I read that one of the people attending this, one of the stars attending this, as well as quite a few of the other actors from both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, will be Kit Harington. Now, we all know that Kit Harington has got a spin-off in the works, not greenlit yet, but in the works with HBO. So no inside information again, but just keep an eye on that, because if he were going to announce something at some point, that would probably be as good a place as any. Let's go to some questions in the chat. Marvin Martin saying, Otto told them they were bribing the lords, so just send Lucerys to say, remember your oath. Enough said. So this is, I assume this is talking about the build-up to the fight over Stormbreaker Bay, which is the one we saw, the first dragon battle of the Dance of the Dragons. Now, the Lucerys was sent there, and he was just told, tell them, remember your oath. The question is, was this some cunning plan from Otto to push this in this way? I don't think this was planned. Certainly on the show, I don't think this was planned by anyone. What happened? You could see from the looks on Aemon's face, for example, the look on his face, he was not expecting Vhagar to do what Vhagar did. So no, I don't think that was intentional. Martin S. saying, do the Targaryens of Game of Thrones descend from Rhaenyra, Team Black, or a half-brother Aegon, Team Green? So, well, Daemon is the short answer actually here. Team Black, I suppose, is the right answer here. If you look at who actually and actively survives at the end of the Dance of the Dragon, Dance of the Dragons, again, as I say, these are book spoilers. I assume they'll stick to this on the show, but we don't know. It's Daemon's children. So that's where the line carries on from. Just having a quick flick through. Andrew K saying, Con is definitely going to drop some future plans. Expect some snow information. Yeah, I mean, that's my guess. As I say, I don't have any information on that, but surely he will be there for a reason. We were saying I'm being shadowed by Team Green instead of Team Black today. Oh dear, am I? I do apologize for that. This is Otto. I'm going to blame Otto for this. While I'm talking. So yeah, in terms of what to expect from Ice and Fire Con, the Game of Thrones convention, I don't know if it's got a really catchy name yet, to be honest, but in terms of who is going to be there, Alfie Allen, I know, is going to be there. Paddy Considine is going to be there. Kit Harington is going to be there. Who else have I heard is going to be there? Steve Toussaint is going to be there as well. So they've got quite a few people who will be worth meeting. So here we go. His changing the background. Is that better? Okay, hopefully we're now back onto Team Black. Apologies for that. That was just me not paying attention to my background. Let's go to a first question from George R.R. Tolkien, this is over on Patreon, saying, "Salutations, Robert. Salutations to you too, sir. I had a question about when the blacks first found out about Viserys' death. In the books, it's almost the opposite of what happens in the show, with Daemon just wanting to storm King's Landing. I feel like in the books he was much more focused and strategic, setting up a perimeter and gathering power. Do you think the showrunners decided to go that way in order to show Rhaenyra as the level-headed one and not just acting out of complete anger like she did in the books, cursing the Greens for killing her daughter?" Well, yeah, I mean, in the book, she does get quite angry, saying they murdered my daughter. The child that she lost in childbirth, she blames the Greens for that, and she says they've stolen my birthright, they will pay for it. Now, this is during and immediately after an incredibly traumatic childbirth, so I think we can probably forgive her for that. But she does come across, I would agree, as a lot more driven in the book than she does on the TV show. I think rather than trying to make her more sympathetic, I think what the idea here for the showrunners is they set this up very early on in episode 1 as this relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra. And so they were trying to almost bookending this relationship quite literally with that book and the page of the book which was ripped out, and that was given to and that was where the message from Alicent to Rhaenyra was passed over on that page from the book that they've been reading all the way back in episode 1. And so they're trying to make that the central narrative of season 1, which is the breakdown in this relationship between those two. And it is them and their last attempts to get peace that is the last thing that is preventing war. So I think that was what they were trying to push, rather than just trying to soften Rhaenyra specifically. I have a feeling that when we get into season 2, when she reacts, we saw her initial reaction to the death of her son, the death of Lucerys, and she turns and in her eyes is war, which was the direction that she was given. The actor was, or they were given, the actor was given. This, I think we will see in season 2 develop into a much stronger, more driven Rhaenyra. Through season 1, yes, she was very clear that it was hers, but she does have some her birthright, but she does have some moments of doubt, and it's people around her like Daemon who are taking the firm action. Let's go to a question from Sam Day, who I think I saw in the chat as well. Hi there, Sam, saying, "Hello, Robert. I was hoping you could give a quick overview of the dragon seeds. Who claims which dragons, which ones change sides?" Okay, so this is definitely something which will be happening in the season 2. They've teed this up with when you got Daemon visiting Vermithor in that last episode. He was basically singing, there may well be multiple levels to that song that he was singing, but when you read the translation, it's about preparing a dragon for bonding with someone. That is what was going on. So Daemon's already starting to think about, how do we get these extra dragons that we've got lying around Dragonstone, and how do we get them onto our side? Because the problem that Team Black had at the start of the war was that, yes, they had a lot of dragons, but they only really had 3 dragon riders who were both mature themselves and on mature dragons. Everyone else, they were teenage or children. So what the thinking was, we've got some really impressive dragons like Vermithor, for example, and how do we get riders for them? So the idea was, well, surely the Valyrians must have some bastard children lying around here somewhere on Dragonstone, Driftmark, wherever. Let's see whether any of them can bond with these dragons, and then they can come onto our side and we can offer them lordships, and then they'll they will win us the war, because it will turn from being something where it's quite balanced at the moment, what the amount of dragons that Team Black has compared to what Team Green has. Team Green has fewer, but they have Vagar, and so they want to try and balance this out a bit. So they open this up. Anyone who believes they are of Targaryen heritage or not and are just feeling brave wants to come and try and bond with the dragon. These are known as the dragon seeds, and eventually we get some who succeed. Now, the names you asked for, sort of the names of who the dragon seeds are and which dragons they bonded with. One that most people know about is Nettles. Nettles bonds with Sheepstealer, and this is a dragon which a few people actually tried to bond with, but Sheepstealer just kind of like burned quite a few of them, and Nettles won the day by offering sheep. Day in, day out. Here's another sheep. Here's another sheep. Winning the trust of the dragon, and eventually she managed to bond with the dragon. So that's the two of them. She did not change sides. She stuck with Daemon throughout. However, at the end of it, Rhaenyra did turn on her. So she basically said, I want Nettle's head. The next two who we should probably mention together are a guy called Hugh Hammer and someone else called Ulf the White. Hugh Hammer was the guy who bonded with Vermithor. The reason I'm mentioning Vermithor is not just because they mentioned Vermithor on the show, but also this is after Vagar, the oldest, biggest, and scariest dragon there is left. So the fact that we've got that now into action makes a huge difference. This is very important for Team Black to get Vermithor into action. Who is Hugh Hammer? I'm really looking forward to seeing this, because he starts out as being quite a brash character, but then he starts getting these delusions of even greater grandeur. Why should I be just a lord? Why shouldn't I be a lord paramount? I'm a dragon rider now. I should be like, why don't you just give me the reach? I could be in Highgarden, that kind of thing. And then eventually it's like, well, you know, there's not many of these Targaryens left, and I'm on Vermithor. Maybe I should claim the crown for myself. So Hugh Hammer did change sides. It was initially switching from black to green, but then really it was just my own side. So he's somebody to look out for. And the other thing, actually, there's a hint of prophecy which Fire and Blood brings out here, which is this idea. He thought that there was a prophecy about like this huge guy with a hammer who will take the throne from the Targaryens. It's quite vague, but everybody, when reading it, goes, oh, that sounds a bit like Robert Baratheon, which makes us wonder whether there is some extra bit of prophecy going on here, which will apply to Robert Baratheon later, but maybe has an early application for Hugh Hammer. They've done a lot about prophecy on the House of the Dragon, so keep an eye on that. I think that they won't be able to resist the idea that there is another prophecy floating around there. Then we get Ulf the White, who claims Silverwing. Silverwing is Queen Alicent's old dragon. And Ulf the White claims the dragon. It hangs around with Hugh Hammer for a bit, so does kind of switch, but basically he just stops and carries on drinking. And literal wars happen around him, battles happen around him, and he's just drinking the night away. So yes, he's a dragon rider, he's a dragon seed. Yes, he switches sides, but it's quite, I mean, it's quite tragic in a way. He does appear to be an alcoholic. He does appear to be completely over his head. He does similarly have slightly grandiose dreams, but he's never going to do anything about it. So his is quite a hard story. And then we get Adam and Alyn Velaryon. Now, Adam and Alyn Velaryon come from Hull, which is on Driftmark, and they are allegedly Laenor's Laenor Velarion's bastard children. Now, that immediately makes us go, well, hang on a minute. Laenor appears to be gay, so is he really going to be having many bastard children running around? That seems a little suspect. Some people then said, well, maybe these are not his, maybe these are Corlys Velarion's bastard children. Whoever they are, they certainly look Valyrian. Silver hair, purple eyes. And Adam of Hull claims Sea Smoke, which was Laenor's old dragon. Alyn tries to claim Nettles. No, he tries to claim Grey Ghost. And can't find Grey Ghost. Grey Ghost is a dragon, quite a mysterious dragon, who is there on Dragonstone, but they just can't find it. There's also another person called Silver Dennis who appears. He tries to claim Sheep Stealer and basically gets his arm bitten off. And as he's there trying to patch up his arm, Cannibal, the other dragon, suddenly appears and gobbles him up. So Silver Dennis never really gets a chance. Alyn Velaryon is there. Well, he starts off as Alyn of Hull, but he then gets legitimized along with Adam. Alyn then just runs out of dragons. So maybe he could have bonded with, say, Grey Ghost, but the opportunity never comes along. So we're left with 4. We've got Nettles, Hugh Hammer, Ulf the White, and Adam of Hull, who becomes Adam Velaryon. And of them, 2, Hugh Hammer and Ulf the White, definitely do switch sides. One of them definitely doesn't, but Rhaenyra calls for her head anyway. That's Nettles. And the other one, Rhaenyra decides none of these dragon seeds are to be trusted, so I'm going to lock him up. And that's Adam Velaryon. At which point, Corlys Velaryon suddenly goes, why are you locking this guy up? He's now my legitimized heir. And he releases him, which is a whole other story. But Adam Velaryon is fascinating because he is the person, one of only 2 people that we read about in the modern era of Westeros who actually visit the Isle of Faces and allegedly meet the Green Men and the center of the Weirwood network. So he's somebody to look out for. They're all fascinating characters in their own way and will, I hope, be a big part of season 2. And I was talking about casting for Rings of Power earlier. This is a bit of casting I'm really looking forward to because they've all got very clear looks going on. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to. Martin S. Which team has the greater wealth and which team has larger armies at the start of the war and potentially? Well, interesting question. So at the start of the war, it was probably a bit more even, but one would have thought Team Green probably have the advantage because they are in King's Landing and they have the royal treasury. And one of the most important things that happened, I've said this before, but it goes under the radar so often, is that they make the decision to split the royal treasury. A quarter of it did stay in King's Landing. A quarter of it went to Casterly Rock. A quarter of it went to Old Town. A quarter of it went to the Iron Bank of Bravos. And that meant when Rhaenyra came in, there was no money left. So suddenly they had no money. The Velaryons were incredibly rich. However, relatively early on in the war, basically Spicetown just gets razed to the ground and they lose a huge amount of cash. So the Team Green did have the monetary advantage. In terms of the larger armies, I've already talked about the dragons because the potential for the dragons was very clearly Team Black. If they just hung around, this was never going to happen, but if they just hung around and waited for 10 years, then they would have had such a huge advantage that it would have been laughable. They had pretty much all of the dragon eggs. They had all but 6 dragons. Vhagar was huge and ridiculously powerful, but was actually going to start getting old at some point. And we know that when dragons get old, they're harder to handle and harder to rouse into action. But all of the Team Black's dragons pretty much were younger and were just going to get older and fiercer. So give it 10 years where you would get a huge dragon advantage for Team Black. But that 10-year wait was never going to happen. In terms of the physical armies on the ground, it started out with Team Green again. Team Green had they had the Reach, which is the largest army in all of Westeros. They had the Lannisters and the Westerlands, and they also theoretically at least had the Baratheons and the Stormlands, as well as the area around a lot of the mainland of the Crown Lands, which was theirs. The Team Black didn't really have anything. When you saw their war council in episode 10, what you'll see is who is there. You get the Velaryons represented, you get obviously Dragonstone represented, but you have House Celtigar, you have like 1 or 2 random small houses from just off of the coast, but nothing big, nothing impressive, which is why their first real action is to go and try and find allies. They send people off to try and get the Baratheons, to try and get the Arryns, the Starks on board. That is what they needed to do. To start with, all of the armies were Team Green. Later on, it was a lot more even. But as with pretty much the entire war, the balance of power did shift, but never so far in one direction or the other direction that it just made it overwhelming. Andrew K saying those 2 betrayers didn't deserve the iconic dragons. No, it's very fair to say. I think I had another question in the chat somewhere. Oh yeah, here we go. JD Finity saying, I hope you're having a good night. I am, thank you. I was wondering if the Targaryen tradition of burning their dead family is maybe a form of blood magic. Maybe this helps them with their ability to hatch new dragons. That's interesting. I have got a question about Targaryen fire resistance, which is coming up a bit later. But is this a form of blood magic? I mean, possibly. The thing is, we don't know much about Targaryen or Valyrian magic. We got a huge amount of extra information in just like 2 sentences from Viserys when he was like talking about his massive model of old Valyria. And he says, look here, this is where the dragon riders were, on the side of the mountain to be closer to the source of their power. And it's like, oh, okay, so the volcano was the source of their power. And then over there, that's where the blood magicians were. So it turns out that there was like an entire separate group that were the blood magicians. This wasn't just a fire and blood was a thing that all dragon riders did. So we got a lot of extra information just in a couple of sentences, but we still know very little. The fact that the Targaryens are burned probably is just George R. R. Martin using what he does for a lot of the other families of trying to show their culture in how and what happens to their dead. So you remember House Tully, for example. The king goes on and puts on the boat and out into the river. That is the idea of what the Tullys in River Run. They're all about the water. So the Targaryens are all about the fire. So this is their death rite. Further to the north, then we obviously get the death practices of the Starks, burying, putting their dead into the crypts, and also the barrows. The barrows is a big thing in the north. So he has a lot of different burial practices, some of which maybe have magical overtones. Does this one? I've not seen any evidence that it does, because I've not seen any evidence that it's trickled down into the Targaryens that when somebody dies, we're trying to do something else. that's not really what was going on with that. That doesn't mean it's not the case, but because a lot of knowledge was lost. But if it is connected, then I think it's not knowingly connected. Let's go to a question from Creative Branches saying, hello. Which Winterfell rumours do you think the showrunners will go with? Dragon eggs in the crypt, Sarah Snow's secret wedding, an oath of brotherhood with Cregan. So this is going to be one of the fascinating things about season 2 is we get Jacaerys's flight north. First of all, he may well stop off at places like House Arryn. Maybe they'll show us House Manderley as well. That would be great. But the highlight is undoubtedly Winterfell. And the story we're told in Fire and Blood is told from sources who weren't there. That's the first thing we have to say. So we know what the outcome was. We know that there was this pact of ice and fire, that Jacaerys agreed, basically a marriage pact with Cregan Stark about his oldest daughter, Cregan's son. I think it was that basically the two families would be married. But the rest of the details is just rumor. Mushroom claims that. Eustace says that. Mushroom wasn't there. Eustace wasn't there. These are not things that we know, but we have a few good stories. So one of them is that Jacaerys tried, this is Septon Eustace, for example, that nobody seems to remember this, but it's a very Septon Eustace thing to say. Apparently Jacaerys tried to convert Cregan Stark to the faith of the Seven. That doesn't seem likely, because certainly on the show, he's very much being brought up within the Targaryen tradition rather than Faith of the Seven tradition. So that seems just the kind of thing that a Septon would say and make up. But we have three possible things. This bond of brotherly love, brotherhood between Cregan and Jacaerys, I think they will go somewhere down this route. I think clearly the two of them did bond in some way in order to get such a strong alliance, because the Starks didn't. It has to be said. I'll talk a little bit about what the outcome was in terms of forces heading down south. This wasn't just the Starks doing a sort of a nodding to, well, we made this promise, we'll send some people down. This was a full-blooded commitment from the north. Now, so I think that that's entirely possible. And the what we're told in Fire and Blood is that Cregan saw in Jacaerys like a brother who'd lost a father, and he kind of feels a kindred spirit there. And that's the kind of thing that, yeah, okay, that's fine. Nothing too crazy about that. I see no reason why they won't go down that route. Jacaerys falling in love with and marrying Sarah Snow, Cregan's half-sister, seems less likely, I think. Will they include Sarah Snow on the show? Oh, I think they probably will. But whether someone like Jacaerys, who will be in a hurry to get back home, for him to have gone all the way up there, fall madly in love, and marry somebody, knowing full well that he is the heir to the throne now, and other people will care about who he marries, that has got Robb Stark kind of connotations to it, but I don't personally think they'll go quite down that route. Maybe he will just fall in love rather than marry. The dragon eggs in Winterfell crypts is I don't think they're going to do this. So this is a mushroom thing, saying that basically Jacaerys' dragon lays some eggs in Winterfell crypts. We've not heard anything about that through A Song of Ice and Fire. We've not heard the Starks have got dragon eggs down there. The temperature down there is not. Yes, there are hot springs, but not in the crypt, so that would be the wrong place to be putting the dragon eggs. To start with, the dragon wouldn't be able to get down the Winterfell. It's a spiral staircase going down. No, that's not possible. So somebody would have had to take the dragon eggs down there. I don't think it's likely, but I mean, having gone through that makes it sound like it's just going to be a boring meeting. I don't think it will be. I think that this is going to be a meeting of kindred spirits. I think Sarah Snow may well make an appearance. I just think that the wedding seems a little far-fetched for me, anyway. Let's just have a quick flick through the chat. Jeremy of Ice and Fire saying, yeah, there's a lot they can do up north. I personally hope the Sarah Snow storyline is real, adds an extra layer of complexity. Jeremy of Ice and Fire is a new Song of Ice and Fire YouTube channel. I've checked it out. It's excellent. Go and have a look at that. It's well worth a look. Amy Smith saying, in maybe a sick way, I'm excited to see the outcomes from what Blood and Cheese do. Show Helena is fascinating, and it will be interesting to see how they handle that. Yeah, absolutely. Show Helena will have a very, very tragic story. That I am pretty sure. Brothers Crin also in the chat. Hi there. I was on Brothers Crin's channel for a live stream just a week or so ago, talking about Thranduil in Tolkien's universe. So if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, do go and check out the Brothers Crin. Again, another excellent channel. Saying the North can field between 15 and 20,000 men and sends 2,000 cast-offs south. Not to just disagree too strongly with Robert, but it feels like Cregan was hedging his bets, much as David did in the Anarchy. Okay, we can get into this. Who he sent down? So he sends 3 forces down, one after the other, is what I'm saying. First of all, we get the Winter Wolves, which I will talk about a little bit more in a moment, which is those 2,000 men who were probably the most effective fighting force, well, other than dragons themselves, in the entire Dance of the Dragons. He sent a second force, which went down from the Manderleys, and they stayed with Rhaenyra and were basically loyal bodyguards to her. And then after all of that, he then sends down a third force of 10,000, which he personally leads, which ends the war. So yes, the Winter Wolves, you could say, he only sent 2,000, but these were the most effective force, I would argue, in the entire dance, plus probably the best defensive grouping around Rhaenyra, and then the most decisive force at the very end of the war. So it was a significant intervention from my perspective. Whatever Tube saying, Martin talks about Valyria like Atlantis. Thoughts? Yes, a bit. So this is lost knowledge, lost height of civilization, but also perhaps not always something that you would look at and go, I would love to, that should be replicated. So is it like Atlantis? He more often talks about it as being like ancient Rome. And when Rome went, there was this, what in Western European history we call the Dark Ages, because all of the learning of Rome, all of the scientific advances that the Roman Empire had just suddenly got lost, basically. And people spent an age in the Dark Ages, in the dark, just trying to catch back up to where they were. That is the kind of feel that he more often says. But yeah, so Atlantis, I understand that. That's more, so Tolkien definitely did with Numenor. That's the Atlantis vibe going on there. But George R. R. Martin, I think with Valyria, it is more sort of ancient Rome is the kind of idea. Emma Scheinman asking about fire resistance. I've got a question about that coming up, so I will answer that in there, if that's okay. Let's go to a question from Catherine Furseth, saying, "Hi to you from Oxford, where the mulled wine is excellent and the Lamb and Flag is once more open." Well, the Lamb and Flag pub, it's a delight that it's open. For those who do not know, the world's greatest critique group, writing critique group in Oxford, this is what I consider it anyway, the Inklings, Tolkien, Lewis, Dorothy Sayers, others were involved. They met at two different pubs while they were there, the Eagle and Child and the Lamb and Flag. Both have been shut for a while, unfortunately, the last couple of years. The Lamb and Flag has now reopened, to much rejoicing. So if you are in Oxford or passing by, then I would highly recommend it. But my question concerns the Pact of Ice and Fire, or the relationship between the Blacks and the Starks. We have all wondered why Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror. This is back in the Conquest, obviously, and speculations have been of whether Aegon shared his dream of a threat from the north, making them in reality partners towards a common threat. But when I went back to the text, I noticed that Torrhen didn't actually negotiate directly with Aegon, but instead sent his bastard brother Brandon Snow and 3 maesters to negotiate, going back and forth. So do you think this indirect dealing with Aegon had any bearing on the long-term relationship, that the prophecy was not a part of this? Okay, so this is one of those things that, as a Song of Ice and Fire community, we will be working our way through, I am absolutely sure, which is, what are the implications for the wider story of this fact that Aegon the Conqueror had a vision, the Song of Ice and Fire, that passed down, certainly for the first few generations at least, of the Targaryens, which was about protecting Westeros, protecting humanity against the threat from the others. One of the possible implications of this is that when the conquest happened, the North came down with a huge army to oppose the Targaryens, and they sort of stopped. They saw the army that the Targaryens had, they saw the dragons in the sky, and decided instead of attacking, they would negotiate. They did negotiate for a while. Torrhen Stark, who was King of Winter, King of the North, he bent the knee to the Targaryens, and basically he survived. He was no longer allowed to call himself king, but he survived, the Stark survived, and they carried on. One thing which has come back, a number of people have suggested, is perhaps why this happened was because the Aegon talked to Torrhen Stark and said, "Hey, I've got this prophecy about needing to protect the Westeros against the threat from the north." And then Torrhen Stark says, "Hey, we've got prophecies about needing to protect the Westeros against the threat from the north. That's what we do. We've got the wall. Don't worry, we've got it all under control." And Aegon said, "Great, I'll then concentrate on the south and you can live." So that's a theory. Is there any evidence that that happened? At the moment, no. To be honest, there's no actual evidence that happened. What you have come back, Catherine, to say he didn't negotiate directly. Does this impact on that theory? Well, I'll read the text, what it says in Fire and Blood, so we all know what we're talking about. King Torrhen did send Brandon Snow, this is his half-brother, across the Trident, but he crossed with 3 maesters by his side, not to kill, but to treat. All through the night, messages went back and forth. The next morning, Torrhen Stark himself crossed the Trident. There, upon the south bank of the Trident, he knelt, laid the ancient crown of the King's of Winter at Aegon's feet, and swore to be his man. So, he didn't negotiate directly, probably. But I think, just in it on its own terms, there's enough wiggle room in that text to say that the preamble negotiation took place without Torrhen and Aegon meeting, but then Torrhen and Aegon did meet, and perhaps they talked a little bit before Torrhen bent the knee. That is possible. Now, there are lots of arguments against this. I've not yet done a full deep dive into this, but it's certainly noticeable that Aegon doesn't pay much attention to the north for the rest of his reign. Pretty much, it takes him ages, 3 decades, to head up to Winterfell. He doesn't. If he has got this great prophecy about a threat from the north, he doesn't ever seem to think that he needs to be in the north himself. So that's certainly something to work through. Is there a possibility that they did have this conversation about prophecy? Yes, it's a possibility, but we haven't got any actual evidence for it one way or the other yet. Let's go to a question from the Lady Eternal. Hi there, saying, I may be the only fan not looking forward to watching a toddler screaming for his mother in fear before being beheaded. Would it be so bad for them to skip Blood and Cheese entirely? I think... well, yeah, obviously spoilers for season 2. I think they won't be able to resist it, is the first thing, because it has the potential to have the same kind of impact on non-book readers that the Red Wedding had to non-book readers in Game of Thrones. It is horrifying. It is going to be grisly and nasty and happening. I say happening too, but the grown-up most affected by this is the most sympathetic grown-up we've got in the entire show, Helena. So I don't think they're going to be able to resist it, is the short answer. Do they need to? Well, they could cut it out. I think, though, that this would sort of reduce a little bit of the personal vengeance feeling from the Greens, which is important, I think, in the book story at least. The tweak on this I have is that I still think there's a reasonable chance that Blood and Cheese is not going to be a plot come up with by Daemon, but a plot come up with by Mysaria in revenge for Larys starting a spy war. One of the other things that happened in that last episode, which got largely overlooked because everybody's looking at that the great dragon battle at the end of it, was Larys started a spy war against Mysaria. He went out there and burnt her house down. She's going to respond. There's no doubt in my mind Mysaria will respond. She will respond against, whether she knows it was Larys or not, she will respond against the Greens. So how does she do that? She's already threatened the life of a prince. I think there's a fair to middling chance that the person who actually does this is Mysaria, not for Daemon, but for herself. AK Channel TV saying, spoiler, will Rhaenyra make it out of season 2? Hi there, Alicia. Again, another excellent channel. Do go and check out Alicia Kingston, AK Channel TV. In terms of will she make it out of season 2? Yeah, I'll say again what I think the breakdown, what it's looking like at the moment, if it is 4 seasons, which is what they seem to be hinting at. The logical breakdown for me is season 1 ends with the outbreak of war. Season 2 ends with the fall of King's Landing. Season 3 ends with the second fall of King's Landing. Season 4 ends with the end of the dance, the Hour of the Wolf. That seems to be the most logical breakdown of the action, not just in terms of timescale, but if you want to sort of group together events and try and have an ebb and flow. So season 1 is the build up to war. Season 2 starts with the Greens being in a strong position, but shifts it to a point where the Blacks seem to be taking control. Season 3 is the Blacks losing control. And then season 4 is everybody losing everything. So, and on that basis, will Rhaenyra survive season 2? Yes, I think so. I think that Rhaenyra will survive all the way through to the opening 2 or 3 episodes of season 4 would be my best guess. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee. saying Jacaerys will be meeting with House Stark up in Winterfell in season 2. Do you think we will also see any other northern houses like House Reed in season 2 as well? Well, so this was I had the question a bit earlier, and I said I'll be talking a bit more about the North's involvement. So there is the when the deal is struck, the Pact of Ice and Fire, we get the first force going down, which is the Winter Wolves. These are led by a character I'm really looking forward to, who should be a lot of fun, a guy called Roddy the Ruin, who is Roderick Dustin. Now, House Dustin, you may have heard of. They have tangentially important role within Game of Thrones, but they are one of the most important houses in the North. And he heads down with the Winter Wolves, who are the veterans. They're the greybeards, who, as winter is just starting in the North, they're people who think that they would die if they stayed in the North. So they head down south to die in combat, because it's better to die in combat than just die in the freezing cold. So they are the most ferocious fighting force imaginable. And they just go from battle to battle, just saying, right, where do we go next? Let's just put us in charge. We're in the front. Who do we charge at? All the time they're just there trying to take on the opposition. So that's the first. The second, we get the Manderleys. So hopefully we will meet a little bit of House Dustin, or at least Roddy the Ruin. The Manderleys, I hope we should get at least a character from. As for House Reed, my best guess is probably no. The Reeds probably will be staying in the Neck, and Jacaerys will be flying right over it. So I don't think we will be seeing them, but hopefully we will see some of the other northern houses. Sydney, the romantic Taylor, saying, is the North 6 months away from King's Landing? Is that why it takes so long for the North to arrive? Well, yes. So as I say, there are the three forces. The one force from the Manderleys, which can sail, because that's the White Harbour, the only really big port in the north. They can sail just straight down to Dragonstone and King's Landing. The House Dustin, they are in Barrowton, which is at the bottom end of the north. So it's still a long go, but it's not as far as, say, Winterfell. The forces which get sent later, yes, it is 6 months, but it's rallying the troops is not just 6 months. So you send out the ravens, you send out the call for the banners, and first of all, you have to rally them in, say, Winterfell. And the time it takes to get from somewhere like Bear Island or somewhere up in sort of the Last Hearth or somewhere like that in sort of the northeast to get all the way across to Winterfell during winter could be months. And then getting down from Winterfell, yes, it's the best road they've got, the King's Road, down to the main bit of action, it could take 6 months. So yes, that's the reason why the main force of Starks take a long time to get down south. Let's go to a question. So Mara Lee also asking about House Stark, saying, on Game of Thrones, we went to the crypts several times. Do you think the Winterfell crypts, do you think that we will get to see the crypts again in House of the Dragon when Jacaerys visits House Stark at Winterfell? Well, I've already said there is one potential storyline there with the dragon eggs in the crypts. I personally, I don't want them to go down that route, because I think that would just be, for them not to be mentioned in anything in A Song of Ice and Fire, would that not quite work for me, unless they can come up with some later reason why they weren't there. I mean, I don't know, maybe George could get Duncan Egg going up there and Egg claiming them. Who knows? I don't. But so that storyline probably not. But if they're going to go to Winterfell, I think they will show us something iconic about Winterfell for the meeting of the two, or hopefully they'll have more than one meeting, because I think that they should be showing the development of a bond of friendship between Cregan and Jacaerys. The Godswood, yes, but perhaps the crypts themselves. So I think there's a good chance we will see them. I think there's probably slightly less of a chance that the crypts themselves will be important in anything other than a cool setting kind of way. Let's go to a question from AK Channel TV again, saying, do you think Rhaenyra has the Targ madness at the end of the war, wanting Nettles dead? P.S. I believe you may be mistaking me for someone else. Oh, well, I do apologise if I am. I thought you... I take it back, but you're an excellent person nonetheless from what I have seen and read. Do you think that Rhaenyra has the Targ madness at the end of the war? Well, Rhaenyra has... all of the Targaryens have a bad war. So I think it's quite hard to say, to sort of critique any of them. Now, even at the end of season 1, she's had the throne which was promised to her taken away from her, one of her children killed. By the end of it, hashtag spoilers, but by the end of it, she'll see another one of her children killed, and then another one of her children killed, and then she assumes another one of her children killed. Then she also is told, you know, your husband has just run off with a younger lover, and she goes into King's Landing and finally does get this the Iron Throne that she's been wanting for all this time, and it turns out that they haven't got the money to be able to run King's Landing efficiently, and it all goes pear-shaped around her. If she was in a completely calm place at the end of all of that, and she gets effectively run out of town, if she's ends up in a calm place at the end of all of that, then there's something very wrong. She should, I don't, whether it's Targ madness or something else, she should be in a really distraught place, is what my thinking is. I don't personally buy into the Targ madness thing so much. I think that there are, this is the kind of thing that Tyrion says, you know, when a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin kind of thing. That's almost like a saying rather than this is not a real thing. Yes, a lot of Targaryens do go down quite a slightly obsessive, maybe I'm underplaying it, but you know what I mean, a character arc. But is that Rhaenyra here? I think she's going to go through an entirely understandable breakdown of everything that she knows and loves and understands in this world. This is going to be a dark show for anyone who's not read the book. This is, if you thought it started out with some quite dark moments, it's just going to get worse. This is George R. R. Martin showing us the horrors of war, which he does in A Song of Ice and Fire, but he does even more so here. When you read the things that happen, some of them are horrific. So, yeah, this is going to be a dark show. Adrian Birchall, do we trust the Boltons? Of course we don't trust the Boltons. Sydney, the romantic Taylor, who would win in a sword fight, Aemond versus Jon Snow? I mean, I think this is a tough one, but probably Jon, because he's got a Valyrian steel sword, would be my pithy take. Reflective rambling, picking up a question for Konstantin Tranos. Thank you. I love it when people do this. I get a lot of questions and comments going through in the chat. I can't catch them all. If somebody takes somebody else's comment and makes it a super chat, I definitely do spot it. So thank you. It's very generous of you. Do you think old Rhaenyra's peaceful persona comes naturally, or the weight of prophecy forced her to put her Targaryen nature on dormant until Luke's death made the war personal? Oh, interesting. So whether her peaceful persona comes naturally or the weight of prophecy forced her to put her Targaryen nature on dormant until Luke's death made the war personal. I think Luke's death and the death of Visenya, her daughter, that's the child she lost in childbirth, that did push her to a more Targaryen-y place. But all the way through, and if you think, and I think they showed this quite well in House of the Dragon, she seems to have quite a chill personality sometimes. Also, she does seem to be the kind of person who will just get on the back of a dragon and do stuff. There is this, so for example, when Daemon, this is a show thing, but when Daemon stole the dragon egg and she finds out which dragon it is, she gets on her dragon and flies over there and gets it back. That's a Targaryen-y thing to do. Her dad Viserys was like, "Oh well, maybe we should just write back." And it was like, and Otto was there, was like, "No, I'll go over there." And she was just, "Why don't we just take dragons?" And this is her response to what's going on in the Stepstones. Why don't we just go with dragons? That part of her character is always there, but it's only when things, as you say, get personal for her that she unleashes that part of her personality in full, is what I would say. Holly Hobbyist saying, do you see Alicent as a Targaryen? No, she's, I think there's a reason why people still call her Alicent Hightower. She's certainly in the books, no. On the show, they've made a big thing of she's now got the Faith of the Seven symbol on there. She seems to toe this strange line in wanting to have the advantages of being Targaryen, actively encouraging her children to be bonding with dragons. Clearly gave her blessing at the very least for her son and daughter to marry. So she wants some bits of that, but at the same time, kind of watering it down. So no, I don't count her as, she married into the Targaryens, but what is quite noticeable within, it's partly within the fandom, but it's also partly the way that George writes it, is a lot of the people who marry into the Targaryens, we still call them by their maiden name, the women. So Rhea Royce or Emma Arryn, Alicent Hightower, almost as if to say this is a person without Valyrian blood. So it's I don't count her. So Paul Siegel saying, greetings to you. I really enjoyed your tinfoil hat videos about the Song of Ice and Fire universe. Did House of the Dragon cause you to revise any of your grand theories? Interesting. So, well, the first thing to say is about canon. George R. R. Martin has made it very clear. History of Westeros did an interview with him just before the season, when he made it very clear, in his view, there are two different canons. There's book canon and there's show canon, and they are different things. So has anything that's happened in the House of the Dragon, at a first level of this answer, has anything that's happened in House of the Dragon made me reassess what's happening in the books? No, because that's now not book canon, and George R. R. Martin has made it very clear. However, there's a fuzzy bit of ground in the middle, and the one thing which is strongest is this, in terms of it being in that fuzzy ground in the middle, is this Aegon's prophecy business. And I don't think I would say it's made me alter any of my theories. And indeed, what I've said this before, but I tend not to think of it as me having a theory. This is a working hypothesis. So I'm very open to changing. When we get another book, I'm very open to changing any of my theories, working hypotheses, when we have a whole new load of information. I'm not sort of jumping up and down saying this is my theory, and if it's right then I'll be great, if it's wrong then it's going to be terrible. I'm just trying to explain what I think is the most likely explanation of what is going on. That fact that Aegon in the show had a prophecy which has carried on down through the Targaryens, very probably is linked across to the books. George R. R. Martin has talked about this in the context of the books now, so I think that we have to say that is therefore fact. And this, I've not worked through this in full detail, so wait for a video at some point, but this does slightly shift this overarching dynamic of what we have, in that George R. R. Martin has said repeatedly when he was starting out, is that this is like ice and fire, these two different ways of the earth potentially, or the world potentially being destroyed, which led to this. And his original conception for this is you have the dragons, you have the others. These are two different ways that Westeros could be destroyed, and they both have to be dealt with. This creates a slightly different dynamic, because now suddenly the dragons are potentially not just a threat to Westeros, but they're also part of the solution potentially to the others. So this does mean that we are left with a situation where at the end the others are dealt with, at least partly, not entirely still, I think, but at least partly through the interactions of the dragons. And then we're left with a dragon threat, and that then has to be dealt with. So that's my sort of tweak on my overarching understanding of what George R. Martin is doing there. Martin S. saying, which house has the highest quality troops, best trained, most hardened? I'm referring both to House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones. It seems the North would harden troops. Yeah, so we're not told exactly. George R. Martin doesn't, in Westeros, actually, he doesn't do much by way of, here's this legendary unit of soldiers. He does that in Essos quite a bit, but he doesn't do that so much in Westeros. But we do have, so the Winter Wolves, you can see them in action, are incredibly powerful. You can see on the sea, he talks about the Iron Fleet as being this incredibly scary proposition. But there are a few regiments of renown, is probably the way to say it, like the Knights of the Vale are well known. But in sheer weight of numbers, the Reach is there. On their own territory, the Dornish are almost impossible to defeat. Then you get the Winter Wolves, who have absolutely no fear of death. So you get a lot of these different groupings, but nothing quite like the Unsullied that everybody says, oh yes, they're the best defensive unit in all of Essos. Let's go to a question from Max saying, thoughts on Adar recast? Is he coming back to Game of Thrones? I did talk about this right at the top of the stream, so I won't talk about it in much more detail. If you missed it when I was saying that, yes. So in Rings of Power, Joseph Maul, who was Benjen in Game of Thrones, the actor, his role, Adar, in Rings of Power is being recast for season 2. My understanding is this is creative differences or something like that. So he talks about going on wishing to explore new and different things in a tweet which he's done, which doesn't make me think, oh, he's coming back to go to a thing that he's previously done. So my best guess is no, he's let's have a quick look. I think I had another couple of questions in the chat, if I can try and find them. Here we go. Katina saying, hi Robert, love your channel. Thank you. What do you think about the sibling marriage aspect of Targaryen life? Seems pretty distasteful for modern audiences. Is there any value in it for Martin's storytelling? Well, it's is there value in the storytelling? Yes, because this creates a different kind of culture. The Valyrians as a culture are different, and he had to make them different to the First Men, the Andals, the Rhoynar. He had to show some differences, so this is a difference, and it ties in with this kind of well, it ties in with two things. It ties in with the we have to keep the blood pure kind of idea that the Valyrians have, and also for dragon bonding, and also this kind of feeling of superiority that they have, which means that they're sort of above everyone else. And if they were just to intermarry with everyone else, then they would not really be able to claim that. So I think in terms of world building, yes, it's absolutely there. What is quite interesting, I think, from a storytelling perspective, is the fact that this sort of, I'm just trying to think of the right word for this one. It means that when we discover about other bits of incest, as a reader, we're slightly less about it and more thinking, okay, that might just be what they do. For example, Jaime and Cersei, is that if that was the only example of incest, then everybody would be horrified and up in arms about it. That's not to say that they aren't now, but it had a lesser of an impact because of the fact that we know that the Valyrians do this all the time. And I can only assume that that was intentional on his part. Question from AK Channel TV, seeing, will we see another Christina versus Daemon? In the books, he is known as the Kingmaker, but the show seems to make him less complex and petty, unfortunately. Yeah, so he's, I mean, as a character, it's hard. It's hard for me with Daemon, because I think Matt Smith has done an excellent job, and I'm really pleased, and I think the characters come across really well. He is a different character to how he comes across in the books. I think that's probably fair to say. Not hugely different, not completely different, but in terms of sort of an emphasis, he is much darker in the books, and it makes it much easier to believe some of the terrible things that he did. On the show, less so. They have definitely been trying to soften him. The starting point for this, I think, was a discussion, and I love the fact that this happens between actors and the showrunners and reading the book. And Matt Smith and the showrunners had a long meeting and a series of chats about the character of Daemon, which I think is fantastic. And they came to this conclusion that Show Daemon loved his family, Viserys and Rhaenyra, more than power. And that was a really important distinction, because in the book, my shorthand for Daemon is that if you're trying to figure out what he does at any point until the very end, what he does at any point is whatever thing gets him closest to power. Does he need to marry somebody? Does he need to kill somebody? Does he need to invade some of the Stepstones? Whatever it is how does he get closest to power? That is a shorthand in the book for what he does. On the show, no. It's what he does is more driven by his love and respect and unarticulated feelings for his brother and his niece. Paul Siegel saying, thanks for your answer. Count this super chat as an expression of my excitement for more videos about your working hypotheses. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Mumia Obsidian Ali saying, you make a really good point in assessing the various militaries of Westeros. One would have to consider the various aspects and applications of each sector of the Seven Kingdoms. Yeah, as well. And just another random example, the hill tribes of the Vale of Arryn, they've survived there for ages. And I talked about the the Knights of the Vale as being one of the great sort of regiments of renown, effectively, but they couldn't fight in the mountains. That's not territory for sort of chivalric knights to be doing their work, and that is why they survived. The Hill clan survived because nobody could defeat them in their own territory, on their own territory. Bo Barton saying, what do you think about George R. R. Martin basically giving us what if the Habsburgs had nuke story, and the fans being all like, we love it. Keep it up, Robert. Yeah, so the Habsburgs, for those who are slightly less well-versed in European history, the Habsburgs were a royal family in Middle Europe, in sort of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as was, and they intermarried a lot. Yeah, so were the Targaryens inspired by that? Perhaps a little bit. I've not heard him talking about that, but yeah, there is certainly a link across there. Okay, I think that's me caught up in the chat, but roughly halfway through every live stream, I do like to just take a moment to thank two sets of people, really. First of all, patrons, thank you so much. All through this year, your support has been absolutely amazing, so I hugely appreciate it. If you would like to support this channel, the best way to do that is by becoming a patron. There is a link down in the description, or there'll be one appearing at the end of the video if you're watching this back a bit later. Secondly, moderators, you do a fantastic job. Thank you so much. If you're watching this live, if you're in the chat, please could you just show a little bit of love to the moderators? I would hugely appreciate it. They do a fantastic job keeping the chat a safe and positive place for people just to come in and talk about things that we all love. Let's go to questions from my patrons. Let's go to Alhad saying, hi, Robert. I don't remember reading reading even a single mention of dragon horns in Fire and Blood. Still, the riders could effectively control the dragons. Has George decided to move away from the concept of dragon horns? Interesting. So, dragon horns are a big part in A Song of Ice and Fire, specifically Dragon Binder. Now, this is a book-only thing. It didn't appear on the TV show. Euron has this massive horn. I could probably phrase that one slightly better. But a horn of ancient Valyria that allegedly can control dragons. Elsewhere, Dany, during when she flies off on Drogon, she's only flown on Drogon once in the books. This is how far ahead Game of Thrones got, is that Dany only flew on Drogon once and could not control the dragon. And she thinks, oh, back in ancient Valyria, they had magic horns that they used to control dragons. So is there a mention of these dragon horns in Fire and Blood? No. There is not. But my take is that we wouldn't expect there to be, because when Dany thinks about these dragon horns, she thinks about what they had in ancient Valyria, and she doesn't think about, oh, Aegon the Conqueror had a dragon horn. She thinks about ancient Valyria, which means that almost certainly Aegon the Conqueror didn't. What we have with the Targaryens is this kind of law of diminishing returns with their knowledge and understanding of the dragons. It just kind of there are some things we see in Fire and Blood that Dany doesn't seem to have any kind of concept of. We didn't see in Game of Thrones this idea of saddles and chains, the whole idea of the dragon keepers, the concept of how to hatch a dragon egg. All of this is not known to Targaryens in the time of A Song of Ice and Fire. there's an extra level of stuff that even the Targaryens didn't know that they'd lost from the time of Old Valyria. So it appears that Dragonhoz is one of them. The suggestion has to be that perhaps the Targaryens didn't have one or lost it somewhere in the Doom of Valyria, something along those lines. But certainly we never hear of there being one in their time in Westeros. So is he moving away from it? I don't think so. The riders being able to effectively control their dragons is a really interesting one, though, because on the show they've made a big thing about dragons. You can't fundamentally control dragons. We obviously saw that with Vhagar and Anax. That was 2 instances of dragons not being in control. We also got Viserys saying, sort of when he rode Balerion the Black Dread before Balerion the Black Dread died, and he just sort of mutters away saying, this is a force we can't control. We should never have gone down that route. And you just wonder if he thinks that dragons can't be controlled. Does he have some great ancient knowledge that he hasn't shared, some personal experience perhaps of being on Balerion? Because there are moments in Fire and Blood where the Targaryens do not have control of their dragons. Famously, Alicent, when flying Silverwing to the Wall, could not make Silverwing fly north of the Wall. Arya climbed on top of Balerion and clearly wasn't in control. Now, in both of those circumstances, you can say, well, maybe there were mitigating circumstances. Maybe there's a magic of the Wall preventing Silverwing from flying over there. Maybe Arya hadn't actually bonded with Balerion, but was just hanging on for dear life. We don't know. But clearly Dany, in A Dance with Dragons, could not control Drogon. So the idea of dragons not being fully controlled by Targaryens is still there, and the show have drawn it out a little bit more. So that's another little shift in lore that the show have done that I think is reflective of where we really are in the books, but we just haven't had as much evidence because there haven't been adult grown-up dragons. Question from the Lady Eternal saying, follow up to my last super chat. Do you think they will have Helena see it before it happens? And do you think it will influence her choice? This is Blood and Cheese. Planning to boycott the episode in which it happens, but your theories are always interesting. Well, it will happen if you're looking at which episode to boycott, it will happen almost certainly in episode 1 or maybe 2. I think that the likelihood is that they will just wish to start season 2 with something completely gripping and horrifying. Will Helena see it beforehand? I think so. I think she will. I think that the Beware the Beast Beneath the Boards could well be, yes, it was probably Rhaenys on Melis in the Dragon Pit, but it could well also be referring to Blood and Cheese. I think that she will see it. I think this is the tragedy. I think that there's in her future, her death eerily echoes her daughter's death a few years later, which makes me think that they will show that is her having seen her daughter's death. I did a video about Helena a few weeks ago. I have a feeling the way they've set this up, that they are going to make her see the deaths of the people who she cares about before they happen. And eventually it's just going to destroy her inside. So do I think that they will have her see it before it happens? Yes. Do I think it will influence her choice? That's a really interesting one. Maybe... I don't know. It depends what she actually sees, because the thing that we don't know about Helena is, does she understand what she's saying? Because she quite often says things that seem really quite huge and impactful, but in a way that is really kind of light. Just on a smaller example, talking about Aemond having to lose his eye. she says that in this really quite whimsical way. And if she really understood what was going to happen, that's her brother. Surely that wouldn't be how she'd have delivered the line. So you do have to wonder whether she always understands exactly what she's saying. But yeah, it's going to be pretty horrific, and I suspect, we'll have to wait and see, but I suspect it will be episode 1, if failing that, episode 2. Right, let's go to a question from Eric Fogg saying, in House of the Dragon, what characters from Fire and Blood do you see having their storylines removed or given to other characters? Possibly some of the Dragon Seed's actions could be given to existing TV characters, or maybe Laenor could come back to take on some of the roles of Adam or Alyn. I've got a Laenor question coming up later, so I will pick that one up then. But in terms of who might be sort of written out, my take is that they're going to have to expand out from the text rather than contract the text, because this is only, I don't know, 100, 200 pages or so, which they're going to make into 4 big seasons, compared to, say, season 1 of Game of Thrones, which was one whole 800 or so page book. So they're going to have to expand out. So it's not like they're looking for lots of characters to cut. There will be a few that they don't mention until we need to know about them. For example, Deeren, who is down in Old Town. We've had confirmation that he does exist. He is there, but they just didn't mention him in season 1. But there will be a few characters who probably we won't get their whole story. Or let me just reframe that. Some of our primary sources in Fire and Blood, because Fire and Blood is written as a history book, based on other stories and recollections and histories written by others. Some of the people who wrote those original sources are not going to be playing as big a part, have not been playing as big a part as perhaps they were hinting they were in their own accounts. The obvious example is Mushroom here. Now, I don't think anybody believed that Mushroom was at the center of absolutely everything that he claimed to be at the center of. But he hasn't been. There have been a whole lot of things he claimed to have been involved in. What happened between Daemon and Rhaenyra. He claimed to have been the person who took baby Visenya to her funeral pyre, and lots of other things along the way. So he claimed all those things, and they've just cut that. So that's going to be the same for Sept and Eustace. And generally, the Septons and the Maesters have sort of taken a step back compared to the role that we see them in Fire and Blood. There will be probably a couple of other characters that they will sort of morph or add in to other characters, which is something that they did on Game of Thrones. So Gendry, for example, his character was an amalgam of Gendry and also Edric Storm, and they kind of merged those two storylines into this one character. So they might do that kind of thing. For example, Sir Steffon Darklyn has not really made an appearance, and I suspect that that's because they've got Graham McTavish playing a different member of the Kingsguard, and they've decided, okay, he's a great actor, we'll kind of merge these storylines and make him be the significant member of the Kingsguard for Rhaenyra. Let's go to a question from Mara Lee. In the book, we read that Queen Rhaenyra's son, Aegon the Younger, again, warning for spoilers, eventually winds up on the Iron Throne. On the show, we saw the importance of prophecy, Targaryen rule, unification of the Seven Kingdoms against a powerful threat from the north, and why it was so important that Rhaenyra's father tell her all of this as his heir. Do you think we will see a scene in season 2 of Rhaenyra meeting with her heir and telling him about the prophecy, etc.? Well, yes, almost certainly. The interesting thing, well, there's two interesting things. The first interesting thing is that she has not, it would appear, yet told Jacaerys, her heir at the moment on the show, about the prophecy. And he is about to go up to, or has just set off on the show, all the way up to Winterfell to be talking to House Stark, who also care a lot about prophecy. Now, if she had told him beforehand, that would have made for some very interesting conversations, but she doesn't seem to have. So will she, when he gets back, will she tell him? Very probably. But the thing is, again, spoilers for the show, but if they go by what happens in the book, she's just going to start rolling through the heirs. She sticks around for a while, but Jacaerys dies. We've already lost Lucerys. Joffrey dies. She learns about other. She thinks that Viserys is dead. She just, all of these heirs and her children just keep on dying. So we might get a number of different times of her telling her heir about this, and hoping that this is the last time that she has to hand it on. The other thing we have to look out for, though, is that at some point between here and 170 years later, at the time of A Song of Ice and Fire, at some point in that timeline, the prophecy gets lost, and it isn't being passed down from monarch to heir, and it has to be rediscovered. One of the 2 or 3 most obvious points at which that could happen is the Dance of the Dragons, because Rhaenyra keeps on going through burning through these heirs. It may well be that she doesn't have a chance to tell Aegon III before she dies. Kirsty Angel, thank you very much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that. There's one underneath it, which from you. So saying, hi, Robert, off topic, but I was reading about Casterly Rock, and inside is a golden gallery with their most prized possessions, etc., including part of a wall. Could you please elaborate on this? I will. I would love to. Well, the golden gallery, you're absolutely right. Is this, and we only really get hints of this. We've not. I'm just sort of straining my mind, but I don't think in anywhere we've actually had some sort of POV of going through it. We just have memories and sort of reports of it. But yes, it's this long gallery within Casterly Rock, which has all of their great treasures and prizes and things that they've claimed. As for a part of a wall, I do not know is the honest answer on that one. There's always some question that I couldn't, I don't know off the top of my head. What I will do, though, what I try and do whenever these things happen, is to literally cutting and pasting it now into a document, and I will look at that and come back and answer that one at the top of my live stream next week. So if you're here for then look forward to that. The Lady Eternal, thank you very much, saying, theory, Rhaenyra sees Aegon II with the dagger after she's sentenced to death and tells him before her execution. Aegon II is the one that can pass on the info, but doesn't because he didn't believe her. Oh, wow, that would be quite tragic. Okay, so the dagger, this is the dagger which will become the Catspaw dagger in show canon. The dagger has got the prophecy written on it, and the dagger was Viserys's, and it was actually at that episode 8 when he died, that was what they focused on as Alicent was walking out of the room. So they want us to remember that the dagger is there, and this is the embodiment of that prophecy. Obviously, Rhaenyra knows that, but Alicent probably doesn't. She certainly doesn't know of the prophecy. She will just know that this is her husband's dagger. So she will then presumably give this to Aegon, as this was the king had it. And so, yes, it would kind of make sense at the end. What happens in the book is that we get Aegon II, who's like, ta-da, here I am, just magically appearing and basically ordering Rhaenyra's death. Could she at that moment see the dagger and tell him the prophecy, and him not believe it? Well, if she did tell him the prophecy, I can absolutely believe that he wouldn't believe her. In the book, that happens outdoors, so it wouldn't just be him being told. She would have to shout it, and lots of other people would hear. Would she do that? Possibly, if she gets to the point of thinking that this is the most important thing, she has to pass this on to someone. So I like the theory. It's a really interesting thing. We will have to wait and see how they do that. I'm 50-50 at the moment as to whether the prophecy survives the Dance of the Dragons or not. I think that it's the most likely place out of everywhere that it does get lost. And the other next likely place is probably someone like Baelor the Blessed, who burned lots of books of prophecy and heretical works and was all about the Faith of the Seven, so he will have wanted to get rid of anything like that. Caius Ballerina saying, I believe the Lannister Gold Room is based off the Amber Room of the Romanovs. Yeah, I can absolutely believe that. It's described as this incredibly beautiful just collection of all of these, much of them gold, obviously, because the Lannisters have a lot of gold, artifacts and treasures. So yes, the Amber Room of the Romanovs would certainly work with that. A reflective rambling picking up for Callie Summers. What castles are the most defensible from dragons? Would Storm's End's magic work like the wall? Maybe why Aegon didn't use fire there, or use them there. Well, what's most defensible against dragons is quite an interesting one. One would probably say Casterly Rock would have to be quite defendable, because it's not just a castle; it's a rock, and the fortifications and, well, the living quarters and everything else is inside the rock, and so a dragon could breathe fire on the outside of it but not inside. So that would be pretty defendable. In terms of where else might be, Storm's End's an interesting one. Storm's End has magic attached to it, and we know it has magic attached to it, and legendarily perhaps it was partly designed by Bran the Builder. Who knows? They claimed all of the cool things at that time were built by Bran the Builder, and it does definitely have magic involved. We see that in A Song of Ice and Fire. This is why Melisandre has to be rowed into it, because magic can't be cast from outside and pass through. Now, Storm's End, its protections were against, therefore, the weather and magic. Would it be defended against fire? I don't think so. I think that it's probably got the best chance outside of what I already mentioned with Casterly Rock, but no, I don't personally think so. In terms of the other sort of castles around there, Winterfell. I mean, if you get a dragon as old as Balerion, it could melt castles, so Winterfell could. Highgarden is generally not a particularly defendable castle at all, and then the Red Keep, no. So I think Storm's End magic might do that. George R. R. Martin is very clear that he doesn't want to give us a complete breakdown of magic. He doesn't want to explain how magic works. because he thinks that takes away from some of the mystery. So we don't have a categorical answer on how does Storm's End magical, how do Storm's End's magical defenses work, because otherwise it would just suddenly seem, well, how do we work around that? The fact that it's not known adds to the mystery and adds to the mystique of the place. Kelly Summers saying, I think Castamere would be good as well pre-flood since it's underground. Yes. Reflective Rambling saying, wouldn't that also work like a giant tunnel for flames? There would be fuel and ventilation, or people couldn't live in it. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I would happily bow to the superior knowledge of any scientists we have in the chat. Casterly Rock is inside a rock, and yes, there will be ventilation shafts and things like that. Does that mean that Dragonfire could get in there? I don't know. Let's go to question from Shelley J. Could you address the Laenor situation? Yes, so I said I was going to do this. How his story differs from book to TV, and what that might mean for the dragon canon, i.e. will someone else claim sea smoke? Is that even possible while Laenor lives? More broadly, in regards to canon, do you feel that the show version of events can be considered to be the true canon, since the book is acceptably written by unreliable and disagreeing narrators? On the latter point, I'll come to Laenor in just 1 second. On the latter point, George R. Martin is very clear. We have book canon and we have show canon, and these are different things. And the House of the Dragon is not telling this is the truth of what happened in the book. That's not the way that this is set up. It is telling the truth of what happens in show world. Not the truth of what happened in the book. So in the book world, when there are conflicting reports on it, people don't know what happened. And that doesn't, it's not just because they haven't seen the TV show. It could have been some of those other things. So Daemon could be the kind of really horrible character that, I say horrible, a lot darker character that we have in the book. Not the character that we have on the show, if that makes sense. But Laenor's very interesting. In the book, Laenor was killed by Kalkori in front of witnesses. This is different to what happened on the show. On the show, his death was staged, and they had a body, but they burnt it so you couldn't tell who it was. So that's the big difference, is in the book world, everybody could see he was dead, and he didn't get burned, he got stabbed. So he is dead in the book, which means that somebody else can claim his dragon, because this is what happens with dragon bonding, is that if a dragon rider dies, like Laena Velaryon, then somebody else can claim their dragon. Aemond claiming Vhagar. So there's no mystery in the book. There's a bit of a mystery about who orchestrated it. Daemon looks quite suspicious in that instance, but the fact that Laenor is dead is not a mystery. In the show, they have obviously changed this around, so he is still alive. This has huge implications for dragon lore, because we know that what should happen, if they go following what happened in the book, what should happen in season 2 is that Laenor's dragon, Seasmoke, will be claimed by Adam Velaryon. Now, what does this mean? If that is just as it appears to be on the show, if Laenor has disappeared and is living his best life over in Essos and doesn't return, and we never see him again, and he's still alive, this changes our understanding of dragon bonding, because it means that somebody else can bond with a dragon while the original owner is still alive, but they're somewhere else. That would be huge. But perhaps Laenor will die off screen. We don't know. It's possible they may leave that open. The third option, which has been suggested, I think Grey Area suggested it. I think Matt from Joe Magician has suggested it. I'm sure a few others have suggested it, is that Adam Velaryon, who is in the book alleged to be the bastard child of Laenor, actually is Laenor. He comes back. He sees that the world has descended into chaos, and he wants to come back to fight on the side of Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra has given him a new life, and now he feels that he owes her, perhaps. And so he comes back, pretends to be his own bastard child, and claims the dragon. There is an obvious thing here, which is that he would look very much like Laenor, and anyone would probably think that, hey, that's Laenor. Even with the shaving the head thing, it was quite clear who it was. Might they go down that route? Maybe. Maybe, I don't know. It's as I say, there's three obvious ways. Either they change dragon law so that a new person can claim a dragon while the original dragon rider is still alive, or they say Laenor dies off screen, or Laenor comes back and pretends to be someone else. Those are at the moment the only three realistic options I've got. Let's go to a question from Ranabir Mitra saying, hope you're well, Robert. Thank you. Within Fire and Blood context, could Daemon receiving the letter from Rhaenyra regarding Nettles be a kind of foreshadowing for the pink letter? Oh, that's interesting. So the letter from Rhaenyra, he is there in, I think it's Duskendale, with Rhaenyra, with Nettles. The two of them have been hunting for Aemond. They're trying to bring this war to an end. Aemond has been going across the Riverlands, just burning things and just being a bit crazy. And they think we need to get rid of him. So they're trying to do that, and every night they come back to base. But Rhaenyra is told by... Rhaenyra, first of all, is having a bad time in King's Landing. Then two of her dragon seeds, Hugh Hammer, Ulf the White, betray her, flip sides. And she starts thinking these dragon seeds can't be trusted. And so she orders the arrest of Adam Velaryon, and then Mysaria comes and says, and you know that Nettles, she's sleeping with your husband. So at which point Rhaenyra sends a letter to Duskendale saying, aimed at the Lord there, saying, I want Daemon brought back here, I need Nettles dead. And the Maester basically decides, how are we going to do this? I will let Daemon know. And Daemon reads this letter, and they have like a last supper there, and then the two of them fly off. He meets up with Aemond. She goes basically into retirement in the Mountains of the Moon in the Vale. So is this a foreshadowing of the pink letter? The pink letter, which is the letter allegedly sent from Ramsay Bolton to Jon Snow, taunting him and basically trying to get him to come to Winterfell. I don't think so. I think they're doing different roles, unless they change this so that it doesn't actually come from Rhaenyra, because my take on the pink letter, I did a video on this ages ago if you're interested. My take on the pink letter is it doesn't come from Ramsay Bolton. I think this comes from other people who have an interest in getting Jon Snow to be going to Winterfell to try and help Stannis, basically. So unless they're going to go with the letter that Daemon receives is actually not from Rhaenyra, it's from someone else, which they could. then I don't think it's foreshadowing of that particular letter. Pardon me. What would happen, Martin S. saying, what would happen if mages were far more common in George R. Martin's world? What if there were hundreds of Melisandres? Would it affect wars in significant ways, bestowing an advantage to the mage side? Well, yes, I think it would. The way that he has written it is very low fantasy, but there are some questions about whether or not there are, when you add them up, quite a few mages out there in the world. But there don't seem to be many battle mages. That's not a thing he's gone into so far. Not the kind who sort of go onto the battlefield and imbuing this force over here with extra toughness or extra to hit roll or whatever. That's not the kind of magicians that he's gone in for. Melisandre seems to act behind the scenes. That's her preference. But also, well, you can pick any other wizard you like, really. They don't tend to be operating in wars themselves. So just going back to the question, what if there were hundreds of Melisandres? What if they were more common? This would change society, is basically what it is. And one of the reasons why George R. R. Martin, I think, has kept the magic quite low in terms of magic users is so that he can keep the societal constructs the same. Because if you fundamentally have lots of different mages, then they're the people with the power, and sooner or later some of them are going to say, well, why can't I be in control? And so you'd start getting mages in control, and then you start having to have laws about magic usage, and maybe you need to start getting guilds of magicians. It creates a very different world, which feels high fantasy. George R. R. Martin didn't want that. He wanted something which felt quite low fantasy and medieval, and then the threat of what's coming in from the outside, zombies and dragons, feels even greater. So I think it was a deliberate decision on his part, and it would, yes, absolutely change it. Question from the Lady Eternal. Again, thank you. You're being very generous today. Thank you very much. Damon is the foremost dragon expert on House of the Dragon. He calls Sea Smoke an unclaimed dragon. This suggests that in the show, Laenor broke the familiar bond with Sea Smoke when he left. If he hadn't, Sea Smoke likely would have followed to Essos. Well, yeah. So this is interesting. They didn't show it. Is the interesting bit. He has to say that he's an unclaimed dragon, for otherwise he would be giving away what happened. So I personally don't place huge amounts of emphasis on what Daemon or Rhaenyra would say about that, because they have to keep up the pretense that he's dead. From what they've done so far, they would be willing to keep up that pretense, even allowing people to try and fail to bond with Sea Smoke by pretending that Sea Smoke was still available for it. So if Daemon being the foremost dragon expert, he certainly gives the impression of being the person who understands Valyrian traditions the most in this. And if, as I say, this is a way that they could go, if he does say that, yes, this is okay, you can break this bond between a rider and a dragon, and a new person can come in. If that one person has explicitly done it, maybe there's another song that he can sing. Maybe he can go and sing a song and say, that's it, our time has ended, our bond has gone, goodbye, singing it in High Valyrian, and then go. I don't know, but we have not yet seen that. So personally, I wouldn't place the great emphasis on what Daemon or Rhaenyra say at the moment. It's what they will say later on that will be the matter. I'm just having a quick flick through. Andrew Kay saying it seemed a bit odd, especially in terms of Book Damon, to leave an open end with Laenor surviving, and even more so if he came back and was recognized. Yeah, so I mean, this is why the theory about Laenor is going to be Adam Velaryon. It feels like they might go down that route, is because the Adam Velaryon is explicitly claiming to be related to Laenor. So a familial resemblance is possible. And obviously it's Sea Smoke. So it's just, if they go down that route, then he comes back with a new hairstyle or something like that, and says, "Oh, hi there," puts on a slightly different voice. "Hi there, I'd like to try out for Sea Smoke." And then Damon would go, "I know who you are," but everyone else would go, "You look just like Laenor." And this is, "Yeah, I think I'm Laenor's son," or something along those lines. That would be the way that they could do it. Okay, let's go to a question from Julia Erickson saying, "Hi, Robert. I know you have previously discussed how Aegon's dream could have been passed down to Jaehaerys. I wonder if perhaps," and what I'll do now is say what I've said before so that we know before we move on here. So Aegon had the original prophecy. He will definitely have passed it down to Aenys, his firstborn son. But Visenya almost certainly will have known about this as well. She will very probably have passed it down to Maegor, her son, who then became the third king of Westeros. And who would he have passed it down to? Well, his named heir was Arya, and perhaps she could then have told Jaehaerys. So that was the way that I speculated it could have happened. We don't know yet because we haven't been told, but that seemed a reasonable route to me. Jill Erickson says, "I wonder if perhaps Jaehaerys' sister Rhaena knew about it and told him. Since Rhaena rode a dragon and Aegon didn't when they were younger, it would have made a lot of sense for her father to tell her about the dream as well. After all, with her dragon, she would be more important than her brother if the others invaded." So, yeah, this is another route which is possible. I think the thing is, at these early stages, there are quite a few different possible routes. One thing that I would say with Rhaena is that she is the original rider of Dreamfire. And that's interesting because Dreamfire is Helena's dragon. And everybody has pointed out the fact that this is obviously the perfect name for the dragon for a dragon dreamer is Dreamfire. So is this also going to apply to Rhaena? Could Rhaena have had dragon dreams as well? If so, could she have passed it on direct? That's very much a possibility as well. So yeah, I think there's a number of different routes that this information could have got down to Viserys, but I'm not that wedded to any of them. I think any one of 3 or 4 different possible routes could logically have worked, and I'm just happy to wait for somebody to tell me how it is. I don't think it hugely changes the story which route it goes down. We know it gets there. And we know Jaehaerys gets it from someone, whether he got it from Arya, whether he got it from Rhaena, I don't think it matters hugely. Gadzooks saying, "I have been wondering about the incident with Sir Byron Swan trying to emulate Serwyn of the Mirror Shield and failing horribly. Do you think there's something more to this mention, or simply illustrating the folly of taking legends seriously?" Well, for those who don't know, because this is about a page in Fire and Blood, and it's one of those things where it gets introduced as, well, now we come to one of the most curious little incidents in the Dance of the Dragons. It happens, and then at the end of it, they just move on somewhere else. So it's not a hugely important moment. It's just an interesting historical anecdote. At least that's the way that we're told it. And this is the legend we're told. This is Serwan of the Mirror Shield, who way back in the mists of time killed a dragon with a big shiny shield, and he walked up to it, snuck up to it behind this big shiny shield, and the dragon could not see him, could only see its own reflection, and he got so close that he could just stab it and kill the dragon. And that's the legend of Serwan the Mirror Shield. This guy we've got going on here is Byron Swan, who was a minor character, just other than this, just a sort of a minor character who has a few walk-on parts in this drama. But he apparently gets, we're told when during the war, after the Butcher's Ball, but he apparently got this idea that you could shine up a shield and then you could hide behind it and you could sneak up to a dragon and kill a dragon. And he tried it. But what we're told in Fire and Blood is that we have different accounts of which dragon he tried to do. Was it Vagar? Was it Cyrax? I think they even mentioned another dragon as well. But it's like, who was it to? When exactly was it? We don't know. What we know is that he tried it and he got killed. And then the story moves on. So is there more to it than just this simply illustrating the folly of taking legend seriously? I think that's the main point, to be honest, is to show that we often go back to these stories from the Age of Heroes, and George R. Martin does make huge use of history echoing. We get stories from the Age of Heroes that echo down into the current story. I think the main thing here is that, yeah, it didn't work. The echoes don't always happen. If you're trying to recreate, perhaps this is the more nuanced version of this, if you are trying to force a history echo, trying to force one of the legends from the days of yore to be recreated in your own time, then you're probably bound to fail. It will only start happening if you're not doing it, if you're not trying to push it. So that, I think, is probably the slightly more nuanced version. Chaos Ballerina, member of the Members Club here, hi there, saying 2 questions. Why was Aegon's crown missing its rubies? And secondly, why doesn't Daemon's, 3 questions. Why doesn't Daemon's love for his family include all of Viserys's kids? And then picking up thirdly, for Holly H, do you pity Aegon? Well, first question, why was Aegon's crown missing its rubies? I don't have a great answer on that one, I'm afraid, other than they got stolen. Secondly, why doesn't Daemon's love for his family include all of Viserys's kids? This is quite a nuanced one, I think. So his love for this is a show thing, because this is not something which came out, I think, very strongly in the book. But it's his love not for his family broadly. He doesn't seem to have this endless love for anyone in his family. He has this endless love for 2 people, his brother and his niece. Those are the 2 people that he is that are his vulnerable point, not all of the other kids. So does he, if the Dance of the Dragons hadn't happened, and if the prelude to the Dance of the Dragons hadn't happened, and all of Alicent's kids were nice enough kids, yeah, I think he'd have got on really well with them. I don't think there's any particular problem there. He seems, this is show again, but he seems very much only just sort of come out when there's an issue. In terms of the way Matt Smith said, he said, he's a leaner Daemon. I think he leans a lot, which is really true. It is quite an interesting way at looking at character, is if you look at a lot of his scenes, he's there on the edges of it, just sort of like leaning up against a doorway or something like that and observing. And when he decides to act, he acts decisively. But most of the time, he's just observing, and then he gets involved when he has to. So that kind of shows that it's not that he's got this visceral hatred of them per se, certainly at this point in the show, but I think that he's just there willing to step up when they threaten the sole remaining person that is there, his vulnerable point, the person he loves more than anything else, which is Rhaenyra. Curse Ballerina is saying, do you, or picking up for Holly H, do you pity Aegon? I don't know which Aegon you're talking about here. If you're talking about Aegon II, which I shall assume, do I pity Aegon II? I don't know if pity is the right word. I think that they've done a reasonable job so far of teeing this up to make us think he never really wanted this. He's not a sympathetic character. Let's be honest. He's not a sympathetic character, but you can say he didn't want this. And that will probably move on into season 2 to a point where I didn't want this, and now look what it's done to me. So that will make him bitter. And the reaction is not going to be nice. So do I feel pity for him? I have an understanding. I think it's hard to feel pity for somebody who is born into such a privileged background and turns out to be such an arse, basically. But yes, I can understand his character arc. Question from Matt. It's not a question, so Matt Herzog. So I didn't see a question attached to that, but thank you very much for the super chat. Go to a question from 444. Do you think that George R. R. Martin planned the blacks as the reader's favorite side, or was it an accidental byproduct of the Fire and Blood writing process? Interesting question. So the context for this, for those who have not read the book, in Fire and Blood, I do not know anyone who has read Fire and Blood and came out saying, yeah, I was pro Team Green. I thought they were in the right. I was cheering them on. Everyone comes out from it saying Team Black were in the right. I mean, that doesn't mean that they did all good things. That doesn't mean that they were all wonderful characters. That doesn't mean that they were blameless, but it was a coup by the Greens to try and take away Rhaenyra's inheritance. So was that intentional on George R. R. Martin's side to make us sympathetic to the blacks? I think what you say, it's something which came out from the writing process. I think that the way that it was shown was very much the blacks are in the right, but really the horrors of war. This is the main thing for pointers to be taking out. One thing I would say, which I think was pretty undeniably intentional on George R. R. Martin's part, when you read through Fire and Blood, one thing that he does seem to have wanted to show us through this is how through Targaryen history, women have been marginalized and overlooked in terms of being the ruler. And this isn't just like a one-off. This is all the way through. You can, just off the top of my head, you can say Aegon the Conqueror was the first king, and yet we know full well he ruled jointly with his two sister wives, and they actually spent more time on the Iron Throne than him. Going down a generation or a couple of generations, we get Arya was twice the named heir, but she never was crowned. We have Rhaenys, who was the queen who never was. We have Alicent, who effectively rules jointly with Jaehaerys. We learn about laws that effectively she came up with. But she's not. It's not. And then we have Rhaenyra, who not only was she ignored for the crowning of Aegon II, but also when she did sit on the Iron Throne for 6 months as queen, that got expunged from the history records. So that is a specific thing that I'm convinced that George R. R. Martin was trying to do, was trying to show how the Targaryens had this history of even when there was an obvious female contender for the Iron Throne, they did not get it. Part of that is a build-up to Daenerys for the A Song of Ice and Fire, where we're reaching this point where Daenerys she thinks that she is basically the last Targaryen. She's the one who should inherit all of this. But at the back of the reader's mind, we're supposed to be thinking, but what if a male candidate comes along as well? Because the Targaryens always go with the male candidate. And sure enough, George R. R. Martin has given us some male candidates as well, with Fagon, and then presumably where the Jon Snow storyline is going to go. So we're supposed to have what he was setting up in Fire and Blood was this thought at the back of our minds. Yes, Daenerys might well think that she's the rightful heir ruler, but the Targaryens never have an actual female ruler. Matt Herzog, you did have a question. I'm sure I saw it just one moment ago. I'll try and find it again. Who would win in a fight, Alt-Shift-X or Alt-Shift-X? I think we all know the answer to that is Alt-Shift-X, although they're both fine figures of men. So I'm sure they're excellent in battle, both of them. Lion Gamer saying, do you stream on Twitch? I'm actually, thank you, I always forget to say this. I'm simul streaming now, actually. If you go onto Twitch, you will find me on Twitch. I tend not to sort of advertise it, but if you find it easier to watch on Twitch, then yeah, I'm over on Twitch. And if you are watching on Twitch right now, hi there. It's great to see you. So yeah, I am on Twitch. It's not where my focus is, I'll be completely honest about that, but I do hugely appreciate any of you who are watching over there. Okay, let's go to Catherine Fursith saying, and then we're starting to move away from just sort of the Dance of the Dragons time here. If you have time, I had a thought about Dawn. It never quite made sense in the current timeline that Doran is so set on his one master plan to wed Martells to the Targaryens. Do you think that there might, from the time of Aegon the Conqueror to the present, exist a pact of fire and sand, so to speak, that no one knows about? No one ever knew why Aegon sought peace after the letter arrived informing him of his sister wife's death. Could it be connected to some agreement or pact that we do not know about? Well, this is really interesting. For those who are not sure about this, the Doran's master plan, Doran is presented in A Song of Ice and Fire as being this incredibly political, devious, deep thinker, lots of big chess moves on his strategic board. But so far, his master plan has often boiled down to, I'm going to try and marry a member of my family to the Targaryens. That he's tried to do this 3-4 times now. It's basically the big theme of what he's trying to do. So the question is there actually another layer to this? Is this something that we do not know about? Perhaps George R. R. Martin has been keeping from us. Is there a pact between the Targaryens and the Martells? I think the answer probably is no. And the reason for that is that, yes, we did get this letter which went to Aegon the Conqueror, and he ended the war on Dawn. And clearly this was huge for him. And within the context of the prophecy that we have, the Song of Ice and Fire, that becomes even more huge, because this is actually him giving up on this thing that he believes is his sworn duty, to be protecting, to be unifying the Seven Kingdoms, to be unifying Westeros. He is giving up on that by saying, no, I'm not going to invade Dawn. Now, was this the start of a pact with Dawn? I think not, because that all of that was the first Dornish War. We then have 3 more official Dornish wars, plus an invasion of Dorne by Daeron. So Daeron the First. So if there was some pact originally, it certainly didn't pass on down to later generations of the Targaryens and the Martells, because at different points in time, the Targaryens tried to invade Dorne again, and the Martells, bizarrely, did even try and attack the Seven Kingdoms, the Targaryens. So they carried on being at war. So I don't think so. I think there are more levels to Doran's master plan. I'm sometimes slightly mean to poor old Doran. There are more levels to what he's trying to do, and we will see them in the Winds of Winter. He's been sending the Sand Snakes off to be basically assassinating people in King's Landing. There is more to his plan than just marrying his family to the Targaryens, but that is a big part of it. Karas Ballerina. Oh, this is a member question. If you're a member here at Members Club, then you get every now and then, I think once a month, you get a free super chat effectively. So thank you. This is picking up for Kenny G420. Do you think that there will come any significance of the dragons that died above or near the God's Eye or the Isle of Faces? Yeah, I do. And the Targaryens who did. So this is a video I will definitely do when I get a bit of time to do some proper research into it. But I am sure that there is more to this. The battle above the God's Eye, when Daemon kills Aemond, and on their dragons, Caraxes and Vagar, they all fall down into the God's Eye Lake and die. Now, why is that important? Because suddenly we get dragon blood, we get Targaryen blood in the waters near the Isle of Faces, and the weirwood trees will drink it up. And we know that through blood, this is how the weirwood trees start to assimilate memories and knowledge. So this is an important moment because they will start understanding what's going on with the Targaryens. And possibly we're going to have Daemon knowing about this prophecy. We've already had Rhaenyra start to tell him about it. In episode 10, he didn't take it well, but she started to tell him about it. And if he knows, that means that the Weirwood Network could know. And if the Weirwood Network could know, that would explain why suddenly the Weirwood Network, through Bloodravens, start getting interested in the Targaryens, because they do. And that's where my meta theory, you knew it was going to come around to Bloodraven eventually. All of my mega theories come around to Bloodraven eventually, but that is where that is going to start tying in. The Weirwood Network cares about the Targaryens because Bloodraven cares about the prince that was promised. So, and that has to come from somewhere. Amy Smith, is there any record of the Blacks Maester conspiring against them? I know they're technically neutral, but you know. Yeah, so there's a lot of... well, in Fire and Blood, because this is written by the Maesters, they kind of hide stuff, or don't question too hard or gloss over things. And so there is no motivation for them to show anything here. Is there any direct evidence that the Maester at Dragonstone was directly undermining Rhaenyra? I don't think there is. She does lose faith in him at one point, but I don't think that there's much evidence that he's actively plotting against her at the time when he would have to, for it to actually make a difference at the beginning of the Dance of the Dragons. If we are buying into this idea that the Maester conspiracy wants the High Towers to win the Civil War, if a Maester was there at Dragonstone, you'd have thought that they would have had more of an influence if they were actively trying to stop the blacks from doing stuff. I don't know. So I don't think it's huge amounts. Martin S. What is general training for Targaryen family members aside from dragon bond? Swordsmanship, history, diplomacy? Is there a gender difference there? I don't think we've been told specifically. Yes, there is, I think, a general presumption that the male Targaryens will learn to be fighters of some kind. And although some clearly don't take to it and clearly decide to go down paths of learning, that was certainly Maester Aemon went that way. One of the Jaehaerys and Alicent's children, also Maester Vaemon, went that way as well. So some of them do seem to go there. I don't think there's a set path of learning for them. One thing which is interesting with Rhaegar is that he seems to have turned up. One day he turns up into the castle yard and says, right, train me. It seems I must be a fighter. It's because he thought that he was the prince that was promised. And he, having read his scrolls, which was taking up most of his early life, he then decides he needs to become a fighter. So you can start taking control. When you start getting a little bit older, you can take control of your own learning. But yeah, they did seem to be teaching them some bits of history and lore and how to manage things. There was the closest to a training program that they had was a lot of the time the heir to the throne was made Hand of the King. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. And when they weren't, they were brought into the councils to learn how things go. So Rhaenyra is brought into the small council to learn about how to rule, stuff like that. Daemon is a bit annoyed that he has never made Hand of the King because this is a thing which happened. His father was made Hand of the King, and before he died, and it's just this is the way that they often did it. That the heir would learn on the job as being Hand of the King. Reflective Rambling asking for when the Blame Bloodraven t-shirt's coming out. It will soon, although merch, by the way, I should point out, Christmas merch now available. I've remembered 2 weeks in a row. And I'm doing this because hopefully underneath the video there should be like a whole lot of merch. You can now order Santa hats with Deep Geek on, which, you know, what more could you want in life? Callie Summers saying, thank you very much for the super chat, saying, tinfoil crown. Can dragons talk to each other? Could they have their own prophecies handed down? Maybe that's where dreamers get their visions. Can they talk to, well, they can communicate. George R. R. Martin has said that dragons are intelligent, but sort of like an intelligent dog kind of intelligence. This isn't like they're not like Smaug in The Hobbit, being able to talk and capable of analytical thought, stuff like that. They're not at that level. They are intelligent beasts, but not that level of intelligence. So can they communicate? Yes, they can. But at quite a base level. Would they be able to communicate one to another a detailed prophecy? Probably not in a way which would be able to understand it. Could it be passed on? Could dragon dreams be passed on via dragons? That's very possible. I mean, we know so little about how this works. It is entirely possible that you can have things passed on to you. Could, as a wild and random thing, could Viserys have this abiding love of old Valyria and understanding of old Valyria, at least in part because he rode Balerion, the last creature still alive when he rode him, that remembered Old Valyria, had been born in Old Valyria. Yeah, I think that's incredibly possible. Could therefore the dragon dreams be more than just, we call them dragon dreams because there's a Targaryen involved? Could they be linked to the presence of dragons in some way? Possibly. We don't know. Dragon dreams still happened when the dragons weren't around, but yeah, there's a lot of imponderables in that. So I was sort of talking myself around a corner there. But the answer is, I don't think they can talk to each other to pass on literal prophecies, but their role within the Targaryen dynamic, and the Targaryen dynamic includes prophecy, is very real. And so they could be an important part in that. Let's go to a question from, I think I've got about 2 more questions here from my patrons. James Horner. Hi, Robert. What is your opinion on the Targaryen ability to tolerate certain amounts of fire? This was a question that I had talked a little bit about earlier. What George R. Martin has said that they can survive higher levels of fire than ordinary people, but are not fireproof. In House of the Dragon, Daemon has clear burn scars where he was shot with fire arrows, but it is not commented on one way or the other. In Fire and Blood, comes close to mentioning it when talking about the Battle of Rook's Rest. One character is described as having their armor melt into their body while getting badly burned. But it mentions this almost in passing, as if it's normal to have survived fire that melts steel. Then finally, there is Dany, who seems very fireproof to me. Do you think that the magic that hatched her dragons could have somehow stopped her from burning? Well, there's a lot of points in there. One thing which is really interesting, Daemon having clear burn scars where he's shot with fire arrows. I would love to know, please tell me in the chat here, because it's something that it's the potential for a tinfoil theory, which you'll see in just one moment. Daemon does have scars. We don't see them very clearly, though. When we get that Driftmark episode and he gets naked and up close and personal with Rhaenyra, it's very dark, but you can make out scars on his body. They could be burn scars, or they could be grayscale. Because if you remember when he fought the crab feeder clearly had well-developed grayscale, and Daemon went in and fought hand-to-hand combat with him, got his blood all over him, held up his head. It was all very grim and grisly, but if you were going to catch grayscale from anyone, perhaps that's the way to do it. Does anyone know what those scars were? I would love to know. If you could let me know in the chat. But in terms of fire more broadly, yes, George R. R. Martin has said basically that they have fire resistance, but they are not immune to fire or heat resistance. So you get Dany loving really hot baths, and you get Targaryen surviving burnings that others probably wouldn't. The issue about Dany is an interesting one, because she does go into a funeral pyre, which is burning. Everyone thinks that she's committing suicide when she walks in, and she survives. And yes, her hair gets burned off, but she seems well at the other end. Now, George R. R. Martin has written about this. He spoke about this, and what he said is this is quoting from him: the birth of Dany's dragons was unique, magical, wondrous, a miracle. She is called the Unburnt because she walked into the flames and lived. So she is rare even for Targaryens, but this is about that instant. He's talked about it in similar ways elsewhere. That was just this conjunction of all of the right elements at the right time to make this one miraculous, unique moment happen. That's not a general thing that happens. She couldn't walk into another fire and survive in the exact same way. It was a unique situation, which gave her this name, the Unburnt. That's why it's one of her titles, because it's not just she's a Targaryen, Targaryens can do that. This was a, whoa, she's unburnt. So that's where the sort of the balance lies, is that yes, there is some fire heat resistance, but they still burn, and this is why the bodies are burned as well. I'm just having a quick flick through. For my people saying they clarified that Damon didn't catch Grayscale. Interesting. Just see whether anyone else had something to say on that. Agree. Weirwood saying the Maesters seem to have a cure for Grayscale. Yeah, this is in show world, definitely. Show canon. It's not so clear in book canon whether they do. Hamdi Gaming saying, I don't think it's Grayscale, looks like burning scars. Okay, so I think I'm going to go with that as saying no, this wasn't, which is a shame because it could have been a great tinfoil theory. Let's get to my last question from my patrons. This is Lady Pushkins saying, hi Robert, on the back of last week's conversation on your Well Told Tale channel, yes, that's my second channel for anyone who does not know, the Well Told Tale, which is me reading audiobooks basically. I just tried to introduce people to the best fantasy and science fiction ever written. Conan, Call of Cthulhu, War of the Worlds, things like that. If you love that as much as I do, and you like audiobooks, that's my second channel. Is there any chance you could read some poetry? 'Twas the Night Before Christmas is one of my favorites, if copyright allows. Sorry for being off topic. Well, yeah, I will probably, actually, that's a wonderful idea, and I will probably do that over on that channel. So if that's the kind of thing that would tempt you over there, then please do go and do that. But now I will jump into the chat, see if there's any more questions. Karas Ballerina saying Alt-Shift-X put out the idea that the scales on Visenya were grayscale, not dragon scales. That's an interesting idea. So this is the this is Rhaenyra's daughter that obviously died. Reflective Rambling saying shameless self-plug. I'm very happy to plug you shamelessly. I have 2 giveaways on Twitter: The Fall of Numenor, and which is the new book, Tolkien book, and Alicent Funko must be willing to email me their address. If you don't have Twitter, at me. So yes, do go and follow Reflective Rambling over on Twitter. Agree with saying Dan and Dave decided she was immune. Andrew K saying Danny's pyre survival mostly tied to blood and fire magic, in my opinion. Yeah, so George R. R. Martin basically has said what happened with that is, as I say, it's unique, it's magical. She just did, following instinct, she did all of the things that were needed at the exact right time when there was a red comet above, and the right sacrifices were made, and the right things were done, and the right intention was there, and there was magical things swirling around. That everything just worked perfectly in that moment. Not a thing that could be replicated. So that was very much a one-off. And Callie-san was picking up. I'm happy to plug you shamelessly. I'm coming out with quite a few double entendres on this one. Ranabir Mitra, aren't you excited about the Man United situation? It's the football equivalent of a Milanese nod. I am. I don't want to get too much drawn into that because this isn't a football live stream, but yes, I'm delighted if Manchester United could have new owners. Obviously, wait to see who the new owners are first, but I think this is potentially a wonderful thing for my football club. So with that, I'm going to start drawing this one to a close. Thank you so much to patrons, anyone who's been asking the questions, some fantastic questions today, and also to moderators. You've been wonderful as always. If you're watching this back a little bit later, appearing somewhere around here will be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here will be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. you will be getting more videos coming out from me. I'm aiming to do a couple of videos a week for the next while. And I'll be back this time next week with another live stream. That's all for this time. Take care, and I will see you again soon.